Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is the council meeting for June 10th, 2024. At this time, I would ask that we rise for the playing of the national anthem and a moment of reflection. Please be seated. At this time, I will look to Councillor McPherson to read the land acknowledgement.
The land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability.
Thank you, Councillor. On to this evening's Mayor's Report. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and begin this evening on behalf of Council and City staff with condolences. We'd like to extend our condolences to the family and friends of former Port Dalhousie City Councillor Bill Louie, who passed away on June 4th. Bill was active in business in St. Catharines, practicing as a chartered accountant at several firms, and he was also a member of the Rotary Club of St. Catharines. We want to remember his dedication to our community, and we extend our condolences to Bill's family and friends. This past weekend, I had the opportunity, along with Councillors McPherson, Townsend, and Miller, to attend the FCM conference. A very enlightening conference. This was my first opportunity to visit FCM and to attend the sessions that were held there. It's always interesting to get the perspectives of councillors from other parts of the country. Well, I think AMO was always a very valuable experience. Getting to talk with councillors from Selkirk, Manitoba, and the city of Vancouver, and Truro, Nova Scotia, it provides a very different perspective on the challenges, many of which we all face, but are all approaching in very different ways. I do know that city staff tend to get frustrated when some of us go away to these conferences because we come back with ideas. And ideas can be scary, as Mr. Oakes can attest to. With that said, and on the topic of FCM, I do want to extend my congratulations to our very own Councillor Robin McPherson, who was elected to a seat on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Board of Directors. This achievement is a testament to Robin's dedication and leadership in serving the community, and her new role on the FCM board will allow her to further advocate for the needs and interests of St. Catharines and contribute to shaping policies at the national level. On behalf of St. Catharines Council, I want to congratulate Councillor McPherson on this well-deserved appointment. She, along with Regional Councillor Diana Hewson of Pelham, who was also successful in being elected to the board, will do a fantastic job of representing the concerns of St. Catharines and Niagara at the federal level. Some updates. On June 3rd, we proudly raised the Progress flag at City Hall along with Pride Niagara, members of the 2S LGBTQI community, and allies. It is crucial for all members of our community to stand together in support of 2S LGBTQI+ individuals. And together we can create a more inclusive and accepting society where everyone can live authentically and without fear of discrimination, hate, and violence. I want to give a special shout out to Enzo De Davidis and Pride Niagara, who visited us at our last council meeting. And I want to thank them for hosting all of the amazing events that took place over the first week of June, including the Unity Awards and Pride in the Park. I wanted to once again, by the way, congratulate Councillor McPherson, this time for being awarded the Ed Eldred Award at the Pride Niagara Unity Awards. Round of applause. This award is presented to someone who has worked hard to unite the 2S LGBTQI+ community and raise public and professional 2S LGBTQI+ awareness in the Niagara community. Robin is incredibly deserving of this award, and thank you for your continued advocacy for the community here in St. Catharines. Apparently this is Robin McPherson week. Last week I got the chance to visit the Dunlop Drive Older Adults Center to raise a flag in celebration of Seniors Month across the province. The theme for 2024 is Working for Seniors, which is a time to recognize the hard work seniors have done all their lives to make our community into the great place it is today. After we raised the flag, I got to go in and play pickleball for the first time in my life. I will simply say, where's the fire chief? Oh, is he not here? It's everything you've heard. It's an incredible game. I'm just going to say that. Pickleball is an immense amount of fun. I strongly encourage my friends on council to try it out. I want to shout out my pickleball partner, Jim, who was 94 years old and is still going strong. It's written here, but it's true. I'm actually hooked on pickleball. It was a ridiculously fun amount of time, and I will be back to the Dunlop Older Adults Center to join in the fun again. June is also Indigenous History Month, which is a time to celebrate and acknowledge the rich heritage and contributions of Indigenous communities. The city of St. Catharines is honored to reside on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples. And our journey towards reconciliation is driven by open dialogue, cultural exchange, and a steadfast commitment to truth and understanding. We look forward to amplifying Indigenous voices and fostering a spirit of reconciliation throughout June. Last week, we marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day, a turning point in World War II. On June 6, 1944, brave Canadian soldiers stormed Normandy's beaches, fighting for freedom and peace. We remember the thousands of Canadians who sacrificed their lives and the countless others who came home but forever changed. Their bravery and resilience must never be forgotten. Let us honor their legacy and continue to stand up for a just and peaceful world. Earlier this month, I had the opportunity to attend Chorus Niagara's production of Bernstein's Mass at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre in celebration of their 60th Diamond Jubilee season. Thank you, Chorus Niagara, for your dedication to harmony and for enriching our lives with your amazing voices. Here's to many more years of wonderful music. I will simply say, for those of you who have not seen Bernstein's Mass, and I'm comforted by knowing many in the community felt this way, it is incredibly hard to understand, but still beautiful to hear. And so I took solace in the fact that it was beautiful to listen to, even though much of it was in Latin and I did not understand what they were saying. I also had the opportunity to attend and bring greetings at the Willow Arts Community Unseen exhibit at the Marilyn I. Walker School of Fine and Performing Arts. Willow's talented artists showcase their connection to the downtown St. Catharines art scene, exploring how their voices and experiences are perceived by the community. This exhibit is a testament to their courage and the importance of their perspectives. Featuring 54 artists living in Niagara, the exhibit includes mixed media, sculpture, painting, drawing, photography, fiber arts, music, and poetry. The exhibition runs until June 15th. I would encourage anybody who has the opportunity to head down to the Marilyn I. Walker School of Fine and Performing Arts and check it out. Special congratulations to Shauna McLeod, the founder and executive director of Willow Arts, for pulling this incredible event together. Special congratulations to the Niagara Children's Center, who recently celebrated the success of their Help Kids Shine campaign, which marked their largest fundraiser to date, raising an incredible $401,610. Thank you to the community sponsors, staff, and volunteers who made this year's campaign such a big success. Last week, I was pleased to join staff and community partners at the grand reopening of the Kiwanis Turf Field, which was originally opened in 2011. 13 years later, it needed a refresh. I look forward to watching many football, lacrosse, and soccer games in the coming years. The field looks absolutely fantastic. The colors pop once again, so kudos to CRCS and all the staff at City Hall who were involved in the refresh. And tomorrow will mark the unofficial start of summer as registration for city summer programs launches online for residents of St. Catharines beginning at 6 p.m. Starting June 12th, residents will be able to register in person at the St. Catharines Kiwanis Aquatic Center beginning at 8:30 a.m. Make sure to register early as spots are limited for programming. You can get more information on registration, including links to Active STC and the registration portal at stcatharines.ca/activestcprograms. Last little bit of news. I was pleased today to join Associate Minister Sam Osterhoff and Parliamentary Assistant Patrice Barnes from the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development for a $4.7 million investment through the Skills Development Fund here in St. Catharines and Niagara. These dollars will help to continue to train and develop the current and future skilled trades people we so desperately need across the province. And finally, on June 22nd, the Downtown Association presents the Holy Festival of Color, a fun day filled with South Asian culture, food, and color festival like no other. The event will take place on Saturday, June 22nd from 12 to 6 on St. Paul Street between Bond and Court. Check out the event details on the Downtown Association's social media platforms. And I would strongly suggest, if you have the opportunity to head out to that, make sure you wear white so that you can get as colorful as possible. I made the mistake of wearing black last year and was not able to partake, and then was forced to promise that I would allow myself to be painted up and down with multiple colors this year. So I will be there making myself look like a fool. Do we have any additions to the mayor's report this evening? All right, who do I have? Who's pressing the button? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, on Friday night, on your behalf, I attended the grand opening of the Genesis automobile dealership on Ontario Street. They had guests from Korea, Los Angeles. The president of Genesis Canada was there. Very impressive opening, beautiful, modern facility. And I just want to wish them the very best of luck in being successful. Beautiful cars, Mr. Mayor. You'd look good in one.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I also attended a neighborhood barbecue fun day for Cabico on Welland Avenue on Saturday. On your behalf, there's tours of the facility of their, they make kitchen cabinets, and it was really well attended.
Excellent. And shout out to Cabico, who are an excellent employer here in our community and do a lot of great community work. I did just want to throw in, by the way, I was just informed by the clerk that her mom broke both of her wrists for the first time she played pickleball. So be forewarned. It can get rough, I guess, but yeah. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, last week I attended the Pride Awards there at Club Rome along with many staff members. It was a well-attended event, and Robin got award there in her absentee, but it was all told very good. And just Friday, June 7th, there was the grand reopening of the MCC thrift store at 254 Grantham Avenue. I don't know if you've ever in it before. It was really crammed and really hard to navigate. The store is beautiful now. They do a lot locally and internationally with the money raised there. So if you want to get some nice thrifty stuff, and they do have reasonable prices, it's the MCC thrift store at 254 Grantham Avenue in St. George's Ward.
Excellent. All right. Seeing no other jump-ins, we will move on to the adoption of the agenda, and I will turn things over to the clerk, who I'm sure is in trouble with her mother now.
So we do have one amendment to the agenda tonight. Councillor Miller has provided notice that he will be bringing forward motion item 10.1, and that's regarding Salem BME Church and gravestones for freedom seekers. He's going to bring that forward at the next council meeting. There are 2 items of additional correspondence that have been placed in Council's Sugar Sync folder. The first is the correspondence from councillors that have expressed an interest in being appointed to the Municipal Development Corporation Board of Directors. That's for item 9.1. And the second is a memorandum from the Director of Community Recreation and Culture Services regarding indoor tennis at Community Park. Operator withdraws submission.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And before we get a motion to adopt the agenda, I just wanted to speak quickly to the motion with respect to the gravestones for freedom seekers. It's been deferred. Rochelle Bush is here. She was here just to make sure if anybody was coming to watch. We've had really good conversations, especially today. The deferral is both basically to give time for our staff and for Rochelle and her team to find agreement so we can move forward with this project. Very good conversations, though. It's been very it's been a very good working relationship. So I wanted to thank Rochelle, and I know she's here just to make sure if anybody came for the presentation tonight, they understood why we weren't dealing with it. We'll call this one a good news story because we are finding a resolution that makes sure the folks at the BME Church and Salem Chapel are able to continue to do the good work they've been doing in recognizing the history of the freedom seekers in our community. So I want to thank Rochelle, and I want to thank our staff, Deputy CAO, and the folks in CRCS for moving this forward and getting us to a resolution, which hopefully will happen very quickly. With that, I will look to the clerk to, oh, wait a minute, no, I need a motion to move and adopt the agenda. Deputy Mayor and Councillor McPherson as our seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have the minutes from the May 27th meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Miller, Councillor Stevens. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the motion to move the consent reports. Council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion. Can I have a mover for the consent agenda? I will go with Councillor Williamson. And I'm going to look over to the clerk so she can give us the list.
Today's consent agenda includes item 6.1, engineering facilities and environmental services, non-traditional crosswalks, and item 6.2, legal and clerk services, council correspondence. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Excellent. Just before I move on, I gave shout outs to CRCS in the last couple of minutes. I will always shout out CRCS. Wonderful people. They do fantastic work. I should have given the shout outs in those particular cases, though, to Municipal Works. So my apologies to Municipal Works. And I was staring right at Municipal Works when I said it, too. So I apologize for that. All right. So we'll read the declaration to all presenters. Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seed of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into very complex issues, ensuring safe spaces for all in our public discourse. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. We respect the right for everyone to have an opinion and remind the audience views of the public do not always reflect those of the corporation of the City of St. Catharines. And with that, we will move on to our public meeting for today. 7.1, Planning and Building Services, Planning Act, Public Meeting, Recommendation Report, Application to Amend Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw 2013-283, Subject Lands 4 Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street, owner Ray Darchie and Candace Buteau. The purpose of this public meeting is to ensure that sufficient information is available for the public and council to understand the proposed amendment to the official plan and zoning bylaw regarding 4 Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street, and to provide the public with an opportunity for input before council's decision. If a specified person or public body, as defined in the Planning Act, or the registered owner of the land does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission to council prior to council making its decision, they are not entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the council decision, that person may not be added as a party to the hearing of any appeals by others without the permission of the tribunal. The public meeting will proceed as follows. Staff will explain the report and staff's recommendation. The agent will present and council will have an opportunity to ask questions. Members of the public wishing to delegate were advised to register by 9 a.m. today. 2 people have requested to speak. At that time, I will ask, after they have spoken, if anybody else in attendance wishes to speak. At that time, the public meeting will be closed and council will be able to ask staff questions and will consider the report recommendations. The public meeting is now open and I will call upon Natasha McDonald, Planner 1, to present.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Cisco, City Councilors, staff, and members of the public. My name's Natasha McDonald. I'm a planner with the city, and I'm here to present staff's recommendation for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications at 4 Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street. So the subject properties for Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street are at the northwest corner of Ontario Street and where Welland Vale Road and 4th Avenue meet. The properties have frontages along Welland Vale Road and Ontario Street and are located just outside of the downtown core. Here's a view of 4 Welland Vale Road, which has an existing fourplex dwelling and gravel parking area to the rear. The existing driveway to access the property is part of the abutting lot 179 Ontario Street. Here's a view of 179 Ontario Street, which is a vacant lot located between 2 detached dwellings. Shown here is some of the surrounding area, which contains a mix of detached and townhouse dwellings, apartment buildings, and commercial uses along Ontario Street. And there's also detached dwellings along Welland Vale Road, as well as the 4th Avenue and bus stop to the south. These applications are requested to facilitate the development of the 2 properties as a whole, which includes the addition of a 12-unit apartment building at 179 Ontario Street and the retention of the existing fourplex dwelling at 4 Welland Vale Road. The concept proposes to maintain the shared access off Welland Vale Road with an expanded parking area to be shared between the 2 residential uses. The purpose of the official plan amendment is to redesignate 4 Welland Vale Road from low-density residential to mixed use, as well as permit a standalone parking lot to serve both properties. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone 4 Welland Vale Road from low-density residential suburban neighborhood, R1, to medium-density mixed use, M1. This application also requests special provision for both 4 Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street to permit the standalone parking lot serving both properties, as well as to permit a reduced lot area, frontage, parking ratio, and setbacks for the apartment building, and to permit reduced setbacks for the existing fourplex dwelling. The application also proposed prohibiting auto-related uses such as a car wash, motor vehicle, gas station, and repair shop on the lands. Here's the proposed site plan for the development as a whole. So this shows the building footprint of the 12-unit apartment building, which would front onto Ontario Street and have a main entrance located on the southern side to provide access for residents coming from Ontario Street or the parking area to the rear. This also shows the building footprint of the existing fourplex, which is not proposed to change as part of this proposal. The area shaded in gray shows the shared access using the existing driveway and expanded parking area to the rear of the buildings. The parking area will provide a minimum of 13 vehicle parking spaces and 6 bicycle parking spaces. The gray shaded area also contains other shared site functions such as garbage storage, a utility shed, and landscaped open space. Shown here is a markup that illustrates the 3 future condominium lots that the applicant is proposing to facilitate the development. So the area in blue is proposed to be the lot for the proposed apartment building at 179 Ontario Street. The area in yellow is proposed to be the lot for the existing fourplex at 4 Welland Vale Road. And the area in green is proposed to be a new lot where the shared access parking area and other site functions for both properties will be located. Shown here is the proposed elevations for the apartment building along Ontario Street. So the main entrance is along the side of the building with another access to the rear of the building, and there are proposed balconies on the front and rear of the building. Staff have evaluated these applications against provincial regional land use plans and policies, being the provincial policy statement, growth plan, and Niagara official plan, and found that they are consistent with and conforms to provincial and regional policy. The city's official plan currently designates 4 Welland Vale Road as neighborhood residential and 179 Ontario Street as mixed use on Schedule D1 general land use. The neighborhood residential designation permits a range of residential uses at varying densities, and the mixed use designation permits a range of residential and non-residential uses at medium to higher densities. The application proposes to redesignate 4 Welland Vale Road to mixed use on Schedule D1, and this is to match the designation of 179 Ontario Street to facilitate the combined proposal. The official plan further designates 4 Welland Vale Road as low-density residential and 179 Ontario Street as mixed use on Schedule E4, Central Planning District. The low-density residential designation permits a range of residential uses such as detached, townhouse, and fourplex dwellings at a density range between 20 to 32 units per hectare of land. The mixed-use designation permits a range of residential and non-residential uses, including apartment buildings and fourplex dwellings, supporting a minimum density of 100 people and jobs per hectare of land. The proposal requests to redesignate Fort Welland Vale Road to mixed use, which would match the designation of 179 Ontario Street and facilitate the proposed concept. The proposal also requests to add special policies for the lands to permit a standalone parking lot to serve the two buildings, as well as restrict certain auto-related uses. Staff have reviewed the proposal against Section 16.1 of the City Zoning Bylaw, which outlines policies for evaluating official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications. Staff have found that the applications achieve city policy. The city zoning bylaw zones for Welland Vale Road as low-density residential suburban neighborhood, being R1, and this zone permits a range of lower-density residential uses, including fourplex dwellings. The property 179 Ontario Street is zoned medium-density mixed-use, M1, and this zone permits a range of medium-density residential and non-residential uses, including apartment buildings and fourplex dwellings. The proposal requests to rezone for Welland Vale Road to medium-density mixed-use, M1, to match the zoning of 179 Ontario Street. A special provision is also requested to permit a standalone parking lot, as well as address site-specific items, which will be highlighted in the next few slides. So because of the proposed condo structure, which would result in three lots on the subject lands, the special provision reflects these future lot lines. The site-specific zoning for the apartment building lot, outlined in blue, includes a reduced parking ratio of 0.75 spaces per unit, being a minimum of 9 spaces for the 12 units, a reduced lot frontage of 16 meters, a reduced lot area of 48 square meters per unit, reduced rear yard setbacks of 1.5 meters for the building and 0 meters for the balcony to the new shared lot, reduced interior side yard setbacks of 1 meters for the building and platform structure, again, to the new shared lot line. A reduced interior side yard setback of 1.5 meters for the main entrance platform structure to the southern lot line. A maximum building height of 13 meters is also being included in the special provision. And staff would like to note that some of these special provision items are only required due to the proposed lot configuration. In terms of the fourplex lot, which is outlined in yellow, the site-specific zoning requests include a reduced rear yard setback of 2.5 meters to the new shared lot line, a reduced interior side yard setback of 0.45 meters to the new shared lot line, and since the fourplex dwelling is existing, these special provision items are only required due to the proposed lot configuration. The requested site-specific zoning relief for the proposed share lot, outlined in green, includes permitting a standalone parking lot for the purpose of serving for Welland Vale Road and 179 Ontario Street, which will accommodate vehicle and bicycle parking, as well as accessory structures and garbage storage for both lots. Other site-specific zoning relief requested for the new shared lot includes reduced landscape buffer of 0 meters along the western lot line, which exists to some extent today. And to offset this pinch point, staff have included a 6-meter landscape buffer requirement along the northern lot line, as well as a minimum landscaped open space of 35% for the lot. The special provision requests a reduced drive aisle width of 3 meters for the driveway, which exists today, as well as a reduced parking area bump out of 1.3 meters, abutting parking space number 15. The special provision also includes prohibiting certain auto-related uses on the subject lands. So the applications were circulated to city departments and external agencies for review, and no objections were received for the proposed land use. Staff note that Community, Recreation, and Cultural Services staff identified potential concern with the proposed interior side yard setback of 1.5 meters for the elevated side entrance to the apartment building in case it is used as an outdoor amenity area. Planning staff note that we do not have any concerns with the proposed side yard setback to the elevated entrance, and for comparison, the zoning bylaw permits a lesser side yard setback of 1.2 meters for elevated entrances in low-density residential zones. Given the narrow width of the entrance area, staff are satisfied that it will not function as an outdoor amenity area. Should council approve these applications, the proposal will require going through site plan approval, where more technical design items will be addressed, such as finalizing the driveway design at Welland Vale Road. A public open house was held via Zoom on April 24th with 4 participants in attendance. And during the open house and review period of the applications, the city received a mix of comments in support and in opposition to the proposal. So comments received include support for additional housing units with a design that fits in the neighborhood, support for the reduced parking, tree preservation, and retention of the existing fourplex. We also received concerns regarding the use of an apartment building and proposed density, as well as the height, design, and setbacks for the apartment building. We received concerns regarding additional traffic and reduced parking, questions about site drainage, fencing, light pollution, and tree preservation, and we also received a petition signed by 19 area residents. So in response to some of the concerns raised, staff note that the proposed apartment building is a permitted use, and the height, front yard, and interior side yard setbacks to the building comply with the zoning bylaw, and that the proposed density conforms with the official plan. Transportation staff were circulated on the applications and note that the increase of 12 units will not negatively impact the road network and that it can accommodate the proposal. In terms of parking, the property is well served by transit and active transportation infrastructure, as well as being walkable to employment, commercial, and other day-to-day needs. Site functions such as ensuring the property properly drains and does not negatively impact surrounding properties will be applied during site plan approval. And other site items such as perimeter fencing, ensuring there's no light spillover, and public tree preservation will be applied during site plan approval. To summarize the planning analysis, the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are required to facilitate the proposed development as a whole. The proposed apartment building is a permitted use under the current official plan and zoning bylaw designations of 179 Ontario Street, and most of the requested special provision items are a result of the proposed lot configuration of the lands. In conclusion, it is staff's recommendation that council approve the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. The proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan, Niagara official plan, and Garden City plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. And I do ask council to hold the questions for staff until after we have concluded the public meeting. At this time, I will now call the agent, Dan Romanko from Better Neighborhoods, to present. Mr. Romanko, the lectern is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public. My name is Dan Romanko. I'm a professional planner with Better Neighborhoods, and I'm here just to hopefully fill in some of the gaps. Staff did a fairly comprehensive presentation, but just to start off, we've identified here that the properties in question are irregularly shaped, have 2 frontages, both on Welland Vale and Ontario Street. 179 Ontario Street is currently vacant and has been for some time. And 4 Welland Vale is a legal non-conforming fourplex. I think you've seen this slide before. The driveway access is right beneath that tree in the shadows, and 4 Welland Vale is on your left, and 175 Ontario Street is on the corner of Welland and Ontario. This is the vacant lot. You can see there's a grade change from north to south, and we can address, so likely the building will be below or compromising the grade here, so there'll be some grade changes. And there's the existing building it's a mixed-use building on the corner. 181 Ontario Street to the north. Across the street is multi-residential dwelling. There's a vacant lot just south of that, and then another apartment on the corner. To the north of that lot is a 20 residential unit building, 3 stories. And there's Ontario Street looking north. So there is a context for this within the neighborhood, and all of these are zoned mixed use. So staff have already indicated it's a 12-story apartment, or 12-unit, 3-story apartment. We're going to keep the existing fourplex. The common element condominium is a tool that will manage the parking, garbage, bike storage, landscaping, and the services for the 2 buildings that will be tied as parcels of tied land. And we intend to maintain the existing Welland Vale entrance so that there's no disturbance or changes required there. And the siting of the proposed building is such that although there is only a 3-meter setback to Ontario Street, we've moved it back to 8 meters and 6.9, I think, to the balcony so that we can preserve that tree out on Ontario Street. And similarly, we've done something to maintain the mature tree in the rear yard, and that's effectively permitted us to keep the tree. And we had an arborist come out and determine that site configuration would work to do that. This is the site plan. I think you've seen this before, but essentially what's shaded in gray is representative of the common element condo. This is the proposed front elevation, which would be facing Ontario Street. You can see we have balconies. The entrance is to the side. This is the elevation shown from the rear. So you can see just to the left of that is the raised entranceway, which is subject to one of the variances. And this has been designed because the long, narrow nature of this building provides stairwell access that has to be located on the side, as opposed to having a front door and a rear door. So, however, this access also facilitates sidewalk connection from the parking area and also to the sidewalk on Ontario Street. So we probably haven't heard too much about common element condominiums. They're a fairly new tool. Well, they're not that new, but they haven't been getting widespread use much lately. But this is a perfect application for that. And what it does is it allows the distribution of those amenities between these 2 tied parcels. In this case, we keep the parking in the back, and it manages all of the, essentially the utilities for the operation of both. The common element condominium will also be professionally managed, and there will be a reserve fund which is required to maintain the site in perpetuity. And the other advantage of this is that it allows for the condominium allows for the distribution of shared parking amenities. So there's a mechanism within that to adjust for the demand question between the 2 uses. I think one of the greatest advantages of this site is indeed its location. It's pretty accessible to virtually all of the daily needs within walking distance or bus service. 5 minutes to Montebello Park. It was certainly walkable to groceries and churches and parks. Staff have already gone through this detail, but essentially what we're trying to accomplish here is rounding out the corner so that the mixed use is consistent across both properties. And you can see here it's effectively going to achieve that. There were a number of site-specific variances attached to this application, largely in part because it does not conform to the lotting configuration that's being proposed, which is largely due to the common element condominium lot creation. So as a result, whatever you see here that has been identified in green is associated with that function of the common element condo. Some of these other additional variances were not necessarily our request, but are somewhat either situational, like the lot frontage is what it is, the building height was staff variance that's been requested. I'm happy to go through the detail of all these, but essentially, we're just trying to accommodate what this development scheme will accomplish. And there's some more variances here. One important note that will be a benefit to the neighbors through this proposal is improving the existing servicing conditions. So if you see by this drawing, the sanitary sewer laterals, which are illustrated in red, notwithstanding the one that's going towards the proposed building, 183 and 181 Ontario Street currently have right-of-ways across the property. The services are old, and we had trouble getting a camera down them. So those will be replaced, and I think that would be certainly to the benefit of those properties there. And then the condominium would be managing the maintenance of that ongoing. So the benefit of this proposal is that the use is permitted and, in our opinion, it's compatible. It's providing new housing units that support a diversity of options for residents of St. Catharines. The condominium element will manage the parking, the landscaping, garbage collection, and maintenance of the services. The proposal is located within close proximity to amenities and active transportation options, and creates a lower car ownership demand and a lower point of entry. There's no new driveway access, so no cars are going to be in the front yards, and that's also an advantage because you certainly don't want a driveway access on Ontario Street. And as a result, we're promoting good urban design and enhancing the streetscape. I have more slides that go into details of the site-specific zoning, but happy to take questions at this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Romanko. Are there any questions for the presenter? I have Councillor Ratzlaff, followed by Councillor Garcia. Councillor Ratzlaff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, through you. Just a quick question about the parking. So it's reduced, and I do see there's a tree there. And is part of the reason it was reduced was to save that tree, or like if the bike parking was located somewhere else, you could have 2 or 3 more spots there? Is that right? Is that the thinking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you could likely get 2 or 3 spots. The parking reduction is in part to reduce, to save that tree. However, also in order to provide more attainable housing, this site is well equipped to address the proximity question and question of demand for options for people to entry into the affordable.
For sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ratzlaff. Councillor Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. I'm trying to understand the height of the building. Like when I look at it, it looks like if you have a full bottom floor basement, is that a full use of units down there as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's half out of the ground, so there are 3 units on each floor.
So we're calling it 3 stories, but it's almost 4 stories, is what you're saying?
The technical definition of the building is that it's a 3-story building.
Right. Okay, and the one reduction, through you, Mr. Mayor, that you had on the driveway, if I understand, was to reduce it from 5 meters to 3 meters? Was that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are you referring to the driveway aisle or the driveway
aisle,
itself? Yeah. We're showing a 6-meter drive aisle.
At 6 meters, okay.
6-meter drive aisle.
I thought
That's
I saw something that was 3 meters, and so maybe that was on the,
3 meters is the actual driveway entrance to the property.
I see. Okay, and is that sufficient in your mind? Or?
It is.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. I just have one question to follow up what Councillor Ratzlaff asked. So there's 1 less parking spot for all the units. There needs 16, there's only 15 parking spots, correct?
Well, technically, there's 4 required for the Wellandville units, and we're reducing it from 1.25 to 0.75 for the apartment.
So my question would be, when someone is purchasing this condos or rentals or what?
That's yet to be determined.
Okay. So who decides who gets a parking spot and who doesn't when it comes down to filling up the units? Like, or somebody comes to you and there's none left, so if they have a car, I guess they don't rent from you or buy a condo if there's no parking. There's not a minimum of 1 per unit, so, right?
Yeah, through
I
you,
get hung up on parking a bit, so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the question would be up to, I think, any renter or purchaser to determine their needs. As I alluded to earlier, the common element condo is a vehicle to distribute the parking based on demand. So in the event, for example, that there's more demand in the apartment and less in the existing fourplex, that could be redistributed according to the demand. But ultimately, I mean, to your point, if someone was looking to rent and there was no available spaces, that would be a deciding factor.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I have Councillor Dodge, followed by Councillor Townsend. Councillor Dodge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. You said that this is a new way of having development. Is there any green initiatives in this development? Like geothermal or any of those types of things? Because you're saying this is a relatively new way of making a development.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I was referring to earlier was that it's unusual to see a common element condominium with tied parcels. However, this particular situation lends itself particularly well to that because it maintains the parking area in the rear and provides the opportunity for the buildings to front the street. And it would be difficult otherwise to get parking on site, for example. With respect to the second part of your question, there are no intended green initiatives planned as part of this proposal, but it would certainly be meeting energy efficient standards of today.
Okay, so when you're combining the lots the way that you have, I'm thinking that would that not be like a good way to use like a geothermal type heating source, because you could use under the parking lot perhaps to put that system in, or is that not a viable option?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is an option. I don't know how viable it would be economically, particularly given the fact that Fort Welland Vale is currently serviced through its own HVAC system. I mean, it would be something that perhaps could be considered depending on the pro forma that's done for ultimately for the construction of the apartment building.
Okay, well, I hope that's it's a consideration, you know, to help with the carbon footprint on our Earth, and also they say that the payback is over a number of years. That it's more cost efficient for the people that are using the system to heat and cool their home. And then, sorry, one last question: for the fourplex, how many parking spaces did it have before you're combining it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a little difficult to tell. The current situation is that there's a 3-car garage in the back. I don't believe that was being used for car storage. And then at the present time, it's a granular parking area. So it's anywhere potentially between 4 to 6, I would say.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. Councillor Townsend, followed by Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you, Dan, for your presentation. I can always appreciate the preservation of mature trees on the property. My question is in regards to timelines at a time where municipalities are feeling the pressure to build units. What is a timeline on a project like this to get, if this were to move forward, and just a timeline on when it would be built, shovels in the ground?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, As staff have indicated, we still have the site plan approval process ahead of us. Typically, it's no less than 6 months to a year, we found in the past. And then, the construction potentially after that, but that, so it's 2 or 3 years is my guess.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to you to Mr. Romanko. In terms of drainage, the parking lot slopes down to the west, down towards the 12 Mile Creek, and it was a grassy surface, and of course the lot area where the units are proposed to be built was also a grassy area, so you had absorption and water filtering into the ground. Has there been any discussion in terms of drainage for the parking lot, in terms of using permeable pavers or doing something different to address that, or what's the plan in terms of the drainage? Because I'm concerned about the residents that are on Welland Vale downhill from beneath this development.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at the present time, there is a significant grade change to the west, and you can see there's a retention wall here on the left side of the page on the property. That will be reconstructed. I think it's older, it needs some work as part of this effort. If I can take you back to the servicing, there we go. You can see what's highlighted in green is the proposed storm. So given the grade of the parking area in the lower left corner of that parking structure, or the parking area, I don't know if doesn't seem to be numbered correctly, but there's what would appear to be a catch basin, which would drain the site. So there's no overland flows that would be dealt with anyways, part of the site plan approval process.
Thank you. And just to clarify, you mentioned in regard to the height, something about staff. Where did the height come from? Where did the decision to go to the 3+ stories?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, the 13-meter height limit was not something we requested. It was something that staff put in their special provisions. The building was designed at 12.8, so effectively they're just capping the height through that process. We've designed the building in accordance with what we're shown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Romanko, for your presentation. Prior to discussing the report today, we'll hear delegations from, and I will apologize if I get the pronunciation of the names incorrectly, Imre Cave and Christina Rosendahl. Before we hear from them, is there anybody else in attendance who wishes to speak today? All right, seeing none, at this time, I will call upon Imre Cave to speak. Oh, I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. So then I'm going to ask Christina Rosendahl to speak. I'm just going to look to the clerk. I'm not going to find out I can't. Okay, wonderful. I just want to make sure I was allowed to do that. Nobody's ever asked me that question before. The lectern is yours. So as you're working through, if you can just tell the council coordinator next slide and they'll click forward for you.
I need to go fast with it. She said I could use the clicker.
Oh, yeah, the clicker's right there. We will just pause for one moment while our council coordinator gets it set up.
I'm a little tall. I can fit the microphone. Okay. Sorry.
So our system has completely frozen up, so we're just going to take a moment.
Okay.
I could try and tap dance if anybody wants to see that. Put your hand down, Councilor McPherson. Counselor Dodge, you're on the big screen now. I'm just warning you. I just wanted to make sure you were aware you were up on the big screen in the chamber while we try and get the computer sorted out. In the age of Zoom, it's always dangerous when the mic or the camera turns on you and you weren't aware of it, trust me. I've had many a meeting at regional headquarters where one counselor or another didn't realize they were the only one with their camera on, and now they were peering down over top of everybody in the chamber, which we find hilarious, but I doubt they do. We got it, wonderful. All right. Ms. Rosendahl, I believe now the lectern is yours.
Okay, good. And I only have 5 minutes, so I gotta do my timer here. Oh, yours are your timers? Oh, you guys are brilliant, thank you. Can someone give me a 1-minute warning? You will see it in front of you. Oh, you are sweet. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so this is basically a concern with 179 Ontario Street and the whole condo proposed development. So the first thing I'm going to say is, my screen is blank.
We will happily give you a little bit of extra time if the computer decides to be the problem.
All right, okay, good, thank you. So first of all, the one thing that we do want to say is we're not anti-development, we're not anti-infill. So this is not a NIMBY case, right? Like we are pro-development, and that the one thing we're asking for on this project is a reconsideration with due respect to scale, the scale of the project. So by scale, we mean the ratio, we mean compatibility with the neighborhood, we mean proportion, we mean consistency. All right. So let's see, we got that. So here's an image for infill, right? It has a connotation. In this case, we're going to make it fun. So infill is okay, it's legit, it fits. The problem we have is when the infill pushes ratio and pushes scale, it starts to look like this and this. And no matter how many flowers we can put in on it, we don't want that to be the Garden City, right? So that's the point that we're kind of making here. All right. Oh, blank screen. All right, scale. Okay, so the one thing we're asking on this project is a revision. So a consideration for, again, proportion and urban design. With that, we go to black screen. There we go. In your documents, you do actually have the accommodation of growth, and I quote, "All types of new housing will be provided in a manner not to compromise, but to accentuate and enhance the character, structure, function, and accessibility of established residential neighborhoods." So this is our thesis for this. The first thing to note is that the project has insufficient parking. We were talking about that previously. By city bylaw, there should be 19 spaces, 15 for the 12 unit, 4 for the fourplex. The plan only provides 15 spaces, 14 spaces and 1 disabled parking. There is no additional parking included for guests. Our concern is not just for the parking space, but if you rezone the whole thing as an M1, that opens up the condo or apartment for commercial usage as well, which means additional parking for clients. Again, there is no parking for this. The existing fourplex parks 6 cars sometimes on site. We need more parking spaces. Oh, what did I say? Yeah. And just noting that people won't have cars. They're noting that the average Canadian household has 1.5 cars, right? So I think it's a bit, the parking is underrepresented considering. Whoop, this is not moving forward. Oh, come on, puppy. Ah, there we go. Commercial zoning, our concern there is Wellandville is zoned as residential. It's an R1 zone. If you rezone for Wellandville as M1 medium density mixed use, you're setting a precedent for other residences to have that sort of bylaw shifted as well. Again, our concern is that it opens the fourplex and the condo for business development, and that's going to be problematic. We have a blank screen. Okay, traffic hazard, they did a traffic study or they looked at traffic, but if you've ever actually driven on Wellandville Road, you know that that left-hand turn onto 4th, or you know that the turn left from 4th onto Wellandville is extremely tricky. It's definitely a traffic hazard. With an additional 16 vehicles plus possible commercial traffic, we have issues. That's too far. This is 2 lanes of traffic. When there are 4 lanes of traffic, it is quite busy, and basically, we'll skip the bear. Okay, the setback architectural design is another concern we have. Again, when you look at your urban design document, new buildings must relate to existing buildings. Is the street improved or enhanced? And it's our argument and opinion, and it's the opinion of the 19 other residents who signed the petition, that it does not enhance the actual space. You're trying to fit a 12-unit condo in a no-condo residential area. The only condo you have really is the 186 Ontario Street. But why this condo fits is that it has ample side yard space, right? So if we look here, you can see there's quite a bit of spacing in between it and the building next to it. Let's go forward one. There it is. And you can see that there's ample spacing here. Ironically, the spacing that's there pretty much, oh, my slideshow is jumping, is about the same sizes as the space that they're trying to fit this 12-unit condo into. Okay, it's not that much space. Sorry, that's another view of it. Once upon a time, St. Catharines used to pay attention to frontal setbacks, even though this condo is within its legit setback spacing. If you look at 181 and 175, you can see that the setbacks are quite far apart, and the yellow part of the condo is actually jutting quite forward. It doesn't synchronize with the existing housing setbacks, right? So if that's important. So the scale, the design, the inconsistent sort of bits and pieces there don't fit. Okay, this is the important one, the last point. 181 Ontario's right to sunlight is going to be compromised with this development. It's kind of like a new concept. We find that, I think, Niagara Falls, Mississauga, and all of those places do have documents and bylaws starting to address this. So access to sunlight is basically the design and positioning of new buildings should have regard for the impact of the proposed development on year-round sunlight conditions on adjacent properties and streets. Okay, the proposed height and the length of 179 Ontario overshadows 181 Ontario and blocks the sunlight for the majority of the day. So here's the way it looks. Oh, first of all, I should talk. How do we measure this? There's something called the 45-degree rule. It's a standard architectural planning principle, which is basically you're putting a protractor up to windows and you're looking at, is that window getting 45 degrees worth of sunlight, or is the proposed development blocking it? So you want to be able to build something that allows light to come into your neighbor's windows. You can measure this horizontally, you can measure it vertically, but it looks like this. Let's see. So here's your proposed 3-story, 12-unit apartment. You've got 181, you've got 175. If I actually put in our compass points, there's the north point. Here's your east point. So just looking at this, you can see that the sun will be rising in the east, obviously setting in the west, and that 3-story, 12-unit apartment is going to be blocking the sunlight for the majority of the day for 181. Okay, if we do the 45-degree rule, this is what it looks like. We've got a window on the side. We've got sort of bedroom and living room windows on the other side, the back side. So this much area of the proposed building is outside of the 45 degrees, right? It compromises the sunlight. Okay, if we wanted to look at this from a top view, okay, here we've got the building. Okay, here we've got 181 Ontario. If we do the window and 45, that much, okay, starts to block the access. If we look at from the rear yard, we've got the exact same thing where we have bedroom windows and living room windows. They're being blocked by sunlight, or their sunlight is being blocked by the overshadow of the structure. From a side view, here is the condo. This is the scale model. Here's the house of 181 Ontario. Okay, sun is crossing over this way. It's not just the interior of the house that's getting overshadowed. You also have the rear balcony and the rear yard that's going to be overshadowed. So, again, we're pro-development, we're pro-infill, but what we're requesting is a more reasonable design. It's our hope today that with council, it's not just a yes-no vote, but maybe there's a third type of vote, which is go back, take these concerns into consideration, and rescale the actual design. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rosendahl. Are there any questions for the presenter? Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter, thank you for that detailed presentation. So when you ended there, you said you request something more reasonable. Well, can you be specific? Are you requesting that it'd be 1 story lower, for example? Is that what you mean, or?
Again, if we look at the light study, I don't have and I'm not a light study expert, but if we do the measurements, yes, I think 1 story lower would make a difference. However, we're also looking at, again, the front and the rear of the building is still blocking the sunlight, right? So again, when we looked at the petition, when we talked to the actual residents on Welland, Vale, and Ontario, they were all pro-development as well. They're not anti-development, but what they were talking about was a design that was more to scale. So they were okay with a 4-plex, they were okay with a 6-plex, but they did find the 12-unit was overkill in terms of its height and its stretch, right?
Thank you. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, so you would like it to be 1 story lower at least, and you were showing the setback from Ontario that it sticks out way past the adjacent properties. Is that something else you're requesting, that it be, the setback be comparable to the adjacent?
Yes, yeah, and again, I mean, you guys have the documents on urban design, right? So if you're looking at urban design, you're looking at synchronizing, and that front setback should, even though it's a legitimate front setback, it should be set back to the actual existing residences. When Imre does his presentation, he'll talk about the tree, because there's going to be issues with a very mature tree on that site as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just 2 quick questions. The petition, could you just give us an idea of where the residents, were those all from Welland Vale kind of thing?
Actually, they were, and so it's funny, we went to the residents on Welland Vale, and we went with the first petition, and they're like, nope, it was too specific, because they weren't anti-infill, and I don't even know how to say this. They said, Imre and Christina, you guys aren't going to win at this, because when a proposal goes through or when a development goes through, the city's just going to say yes. You guys aren't going to win at this. So in talking to some of the people, they said, look, come back, do a different petition. It's pro-infill. Our concern is traffic density and scale. So that's what we picked up on as well.
Okay, thanks. And I think your concerns were pretty clear. Just the one thing I wasn't sure, the idea of the narrow lots and, you know, the not having, like, what was the specific concern about? Is it just a design aesthetic thing, or is there?
Well, with the right to light, that's...
Okay, so it's connected to...
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah. And honestly, like, have the design and just scale it back, bring it down,
okay,
and then it fits.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Ms. Rosendahl, for your presentation. At this time, I will now call upon Imre Cave to present. And I will say, Ms. Rosendahl said Imre as well, so I feel like I might have gotten the pronunciation there correct.
Pretty close.
Oh, well, pretty close is pretty good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The lectern is yours.
So before I start, I was trying to get somebody to represent me, but it was almost impossible. I find all the planners are geared towards developments, and there is no possibility to opposing persons to find proper representation. So I try to make the best of it, and you have to bear with me because English is not my second language, or not my first language. So I try my best.
That is totally okay, sir. Okay. We appreciate the effort.
So thank you for the council and the mayor to give this opportunity to be heard. Where I'm from originally, we don't have that luxury. Oftentimes government brought decisions without hearing ordinary people's opinions, so I really value that.
The one thing I will ask, don't worry about me back here. Make sure you're speaking into the mic because we do have a counselor at home, and that's how she hears you, okay? Thank you.
Don't feel right to.
No, don't worry about me. Talk to council.
First time.
I promise you, I hear you as well.
Okay, so yeah, so I really appreciate the opportunity to voice my opinion. It's really a first experience for me. Also holding the principles of such things as right to pursue freedom and happiness. This proposal in front of us, I feel it's already failed to comply to the zoning and the bylaws. That's why the developer asking for amendments. Amendments that greatly would stampede on my individual rights and freedoms. I listed 17. I don't know, the clerk has the list. 17 points where I feel that I've been, my freedoms are affected. Because of the lack of time, I can't go through all of them, so I picked a few. So first of all, the privacy issue. Kristen already touched on the light issue. My windows, balconies, and backyard are gonna face about 12 windows of the new building developed. Directly right into my living room and into my bedroom. That's forcing me to use shadings or coverings. I feel the quality of living reduced by that. In new developments, designers designing this building, that neighboring buildings don't have windows facing each other. If they have, they are very highly placed washroom windows. I don't have that luxury. I can't move my windows. The proposed 2-meter high landing on the north side of the building, the entrance, will be on a 2-meter high landing, which will be above my fence, and it will provide an unobstructed view of my patio and my balcony and a whole of my backyard. There is a fire hazard. My chimney is 7.8 meter high. It's approximately we reached the second level of this building. The building is proposed to be 3.3 meters away from my chimney. There are balconies, potentially open windows. Amber can light fire on furniture or paper boxes left in balconies. Potentially, I could get every 5 minutes a neighbor coming over requesting stop using my fireplace because of the smoke is bothering them. The third floor will be completely above my chimney. Furthermore, there is a danger of ice and snow sliding down from the roof in the spring in big chunks. It's a very steep roof high up. I often commute into my side road. That's my entrance to my backyard. Also, my air conditioning is located there. Elevation. We talked about elevation, but never mentioned the fact that all the water from 183, 181 flowing down to 179. There is a natural slopage of the land. The development proposing a retainer wall which would cut all the water going down, creating a swamp in my backyard. So that's not something that I really would like to have. Excavations, both sides of the proposed building, there are old buildings. Mine particularly is 120 years old. I'm worried that such a close proximity of using heavy machinery could damage my foundation, potentially the building as well. I'm not really seeing that being reasonable. So I don't know if you distributed the drawings. Look at image 2 on the pictures. There is a tree. The study done by the developer, in the study it's called 3C. That's the old black walnut tree on Ontario Street. This very study mentions that $42,000 is the value of that old tree. That's not my estimates, that's an arborist estimation. The proposal discussing the use of space, 4.1 meter away from the tree trunk for balconies and 5.1 meter away from the walls. I must add here that the drip line of the tree is 16 meter from the trunk. So if we take the 4.1 and a 5.1 meter allowance, that would seriously encroach into the canopy of that tree, and also the roots almost certainly would result the death of the tree. If we go to condo building on the tree, condo building and the tree, 1/4 of the building actually is into the canopy. There is a circle showing it. According to the study, again, done by the developer, suggests that any consultation is needed to any significant trimming of the roots or the canopy if the tree is located on a neighbor's yard. I have not been consulted yet. Also, furthermore, it describes that any such trimming has to be done by a trained arborist. The same study mentions that 11 trees will be removed because of the construction and suggests that replacement trees should be planted 2-to-1 ratio. I just don't see where it would be possible because of the size of the side yard and the backyard and the front yard. Image number 3 is a tree dubbed 670. That's the big tree in the middle of the property. I have to refer again to the proposal. The arborist identified it as a possible habitat for a bat, which is an endangered species. It's called little brown myotis. I would suggest there is further study needed to be sure there is no habitat in that tree. Oftentimes in the summer I see bats. I'm not saying they reside in that tree, but quite a few bats buzzing around at nights in the summer. The backyard also, in the backyard also there is a backyard frequented by various birds like nightingales, hummingbirds, blue jays, cardinals, proving that is a very fragile environment, the fauna and the zona, and is on the proposed site. Furthermore, personally, I feel that it will be a significant loss in my real estate value if that building is built. I asked an agent at Remax, they approximately say 20-25% devaluation could be expected. This is my life saving, this is my pension plan, so I'm not really happy about that. As far as the indication of the need for more residents, I looked up statistics and it says the healthy vacancy rate in Canada is 3%. National average in Canada is 1.5. It goes as low as Vancouver, 0.9. In St. Catharines, the core, the downtown area is 2.6, so it's almost at the optimal level. If we go down on Ontario Street, there is Ontario 185, 186, 183. There are numerous apartments are vacant for months and months. In fact, they put up a 4-story sign to try to get tenants. Across the street, there is 158. Months and months there are occupancy. So the argument that we don't have enough units, I'm not sure. There are several buildings are for lease as well in the area. So here we face two options, whether or not the amendment will be allowed or they're not going to be allowed. But there is a third option, is to maybe allow it with restrictions or scaling back, which I would have no opposition. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Are there any questions from council? Councilor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the presenter, sir, and I didn't get your last name. Goodbye. Thank you. You said at the outset that you attempted to find a land use planner to represent you. Did you not have success in that pursuit?
Yes, I tried in town. They told me that they don't want to lock horns with developers for further business reasons. I tried Toronto and Hamilton as well, and they were kind of lukewarm, and they said, well, we are in vacation, or several other reasons, but nobody was willing to take on this.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's why you have to bear with me here. I wish I could find somebody who's as eloquent as my opposing.
I thought you did a very good job, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councilor Miller.
Thanks, Mr. Kavai. How long have you lived at that location?
It's my 16th year.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you, sir, for your presentation. You can have a seat.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Can I have, at this time, a motion to close the public meeting? Councillor Harris, Councillor Townsend. So this is to close the public meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The public meeting is now closed and council's called to order. Persons wishing to receive notice of council's decision should submit a written request to the office of the city clerk. Can I have first a councillor and a seconder to move? Councillor Harris, Councillor McPherson. At this time, we can ask questions and provide comment to staff. I'm going to ask councillors questions and comment at the same time, so we can try and get through this with everybody speaking once. I have Councillor Harris, followed by Councillor Kushner and Councillor McPherson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if one of the planners or the urban planner could comment on some of the comments about the design and how it sits back and the different things that the people brought forward. I guess that would be you, Mr. Ritchie.
Sure. Through the mayor to the councillor, I can tackle that, and I'll ask Natasha to jump in if I think I've missed something. One of the key elements of this that we need to consider, and that was considered in our staff report, is that the property is already zoned medium-density mixed use, the property along Ontario Street. Apartment buildings up to 6 stories are already a permitted use on that property. Nothing about this application would add any additional height or density or uses that are not already permitted on that property. The amendments before council today are principally focused on allowing the fourplex, the existing fourplex, to be retained as is, and to allow for a shared parking facility for those 2 properties to exist as a independent parcel in a common element condo. That's the real crux of the amendments being requested for council. In the staff recommendation, we did recommend that height be capped at 13 meters, notwithstanding that the existing height permission is 20. That was an acknowledgement that this is a fairly constrained property, and to try to mitigate some of the issues that we were concerned about, we had an opportunity to respond to a development application and implement a height limit where we don't currently have one that restrictive, to try to, I don't want to say shrink wrap the building, but try to mitigate some of those potential impacts. The front yard setback and the height proposed are already permitted.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Councillor Harris, that's everything? All right, Councillor Kushner.
Thank you. The question I have is with respect to the landscape buffer on the western perimeter. You're recommending that the buffer be reduced to 0.
Through the chair to, through the mayor, sorry, to Councillor Kushner. There is currently a 0-meter landscape buffer at this location for the existing gravel parking area that's there. With the expansion of the parking area, that 0-meter landscape buffer will be increased a bit. And so to offset that, staff have included a couple provision items in the special provision to require that a 6-meter landscape buffer be provided along the northern lot line, as well as 35% of the lot be landscaped open space, so that the proposed concept that we see today with, you know, the lovely trees and sod in the back essentially remains.
Okay. What impact does that have on the neighborhood?
Through the chair to Councillor Kushner, are you asking about the landscape buffer reduction? Yes. So currently there is a detached garage in that area of the reduced landscape buffer, and that 0-meter landscape buffer currently exists. There is going to be fencing installed along there as well to kind of mitigate that that privacy and buffer concern.
Mr. Mayor, what I don't understand is we're attempting to green our community, and yet for landscape buffers, I would think that's very critical for these developments. And I'm concerned that this may become a precedent for other developments where the backyard or whatever is reduced to 0. So I don't understand why we have that requirement and then we reduce it to 0.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ritchie, could you just explain because I am not a planner, nor do I play one on TV, about the 45-degree light angle and plane and all that?
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor. You made me do it. Through the mayor to the councillor, apologies. That 45-degree angular plane is not a test or standard that exists in any municipal policy documents. I think I understand the intention in terms of trying to make sure we have solar access to outdoor amenity spaces. That's certainly an objective that is outlined in our official plan. Typically, the city would require the preparation of shadow studies for any development 6 or more stories. This one's, we'll call it 3.5. Similar height to a detached house or a townhouse, obviously a little bit taller than that. Based on the configuration of the lot, we would expect there would be some shadow impacts on the neighboring houses to particularly the neighbor to the north, likely some morning shadow impacts, and then those shadow impacts passing by midday. We typically try, the direction our official plan is to try to minimize or mitigate shadow impacts, not to avoid all shadow impacts. It's as we're intensifying and trying to accommodate infill housing within our neighborhoods, avoiding all shadow impacts is not possible. We try to make sure that everybody's outdoor amenity space has at least solar access for a good portion of the day, but we cannot guarantee it all day, every day.
So just to follow up on that, so even if there were, and I'm not asking you to give a definitive answer, but there would be impacts of light loss or shade, even if it was a two-story, say it was a two-story home?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes.
Okay, thank you. And just wanted to follow up on for the surrounding properties, yes, there's always disturbances when there is construction. Who is responsible for any damages or any kind of issues with that when it comes to a development like this in a built-up neighborhood?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, we always encourage our developers to undertake what are called precondition surveys or precondition assessments, whereby they ask permission to enter into the neighboring property owners' premises, inspect the foundations, identify any existing damage or deficiencies before any construction activity starts so that there's no misunderstandings about where the origin of cracks or issues that might happen on a site. And we'd absolutely encourage the builder of this project to do the same.
Okay, thank you. And just final question, really it's about that particular corner or pie-shaped sidewalk. Are there any concerns that planning has with potential issues of access? Because it is, for any of those of us who have used that particular area, it can be a bit dicey. So is there any concern around that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, you're referring to the single driveway access off of Welland Vale Road?
Actually, no, the driveway, it's not really the driveway that concerns it, it's just the increased traffic going off of 4th into Welland, onto Welland Vale, and then the other area where you can make left-hand turns. Is there any consideration for putting up no left-hand turns or a no left-hand turn at that second access point?
Through the mayor to the councillor, not at this point, but what I can tell you is that this intersection is part of an ongoing environmental assessment being undertaken by Niagara Region. They're currently undertaking environmental assessment for Ontario Street, which includes this intersection. Even this little bit of access onto Welland Vale Road forms part of the regional intersection of Ontario and Welland and 4th Avenue. Mm-hmm. There may be an opportunity. I do not know if this is within the region's scope, but I know they are looking at the function, design, and operation of those intersections as part of the scope of work for the environmental assessment that is ongoing currently.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor McPherson, thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It was always my idea that when we were developing neighborhoods that that were already there in some respect, that we tried not to have one building protrude past by very much other buildings. I'm looking at this sheet that the last presenter gave us, and it looks like this condominium is protruding along the lot line significantly. I know I had a situation in my ward where a person was going to build a garage, and it was in front of the house, and that was brought to us as something that wasn't possible. But in this one, it seems like it's really protruding past the lot lines of all the single detached houses. Why did we approve that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, you're absolutely right. The proposed building does sit quite a bit in front of the neighboring homes. This site is a bit of a tricky one in that the proposed building is flanked on both sides by two very beautiful mature houses. But it's also located on Ontario Street, which has been identified as it has the medium density mixed use zoning. It's identified as an intensification corridor. So on one hand, we have this existing context with two admittedly very nice homes on either side, but a policy direction or policy framework that identifies this as a preferred location for additional height, additional density, in an area that will transition and intensify over time. So call it growing pains, call it an exercise in trying to get incremental density in a way that tries to respond to the neighboring context without being exactly the same. Our existing zoning, the M1, would not permit a single detached dwelling on this property. That's not an option on this site. There is a directive to try to use these really centrally located, well-served properties as efficiently as we can. And unfortunately, we're in this situation where we're having a bit of a push and pull and balancing act where we're trying to achieve that density, but in a way that somewhat responds to the neighboring built form without copying it.
Sounds like policy is usurping common sense in a case like this, because it's a really attractive street as you're going up and down, and particularly on that side, and to have this condominium sticking out like that is not going to be nearly as attractive. It's going to detract from the streetscape, and I have real concerns with that. And also, the parking situation, the last presenter indicated that the people who are living in the fourplex already might have more than one car per unit. How's that going to happen? Are they all of a sudden going to say, oh, by the way, you got to get rid of a car? That's something that is a concern too, if in fact those people do have more than one car. But I really have concern about the fact that this condominium is going to stick out like a sore thumb. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to, first of all, to follow up on Councillor Phillips' point about compatibility. I know Mr. Ritchie was involved in urban design at one time, and I have to agree with Councillor Phillips that it doesn't seem to me to be appropriate urban design to have this property sticking way out, having a totally different setback from the adjacent properties, which are older established properties. Can you comment on that from an urban design standpoint?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I do want to identify that the existing zoning, the minimum front yard setback is 6 meters. And the proposed building before you right now is around the same. So they're not actually seeking a protrusion into the front yard setback. So as of right, the building location, the proposed building location in that front lot line is as of right. In terms of the questions around averaging front yards, that was a zoning requirement that was applied in the R1 zones. Again, this is a mixed-use zone that was identified along the Ontario Street corridor to reflect the variety of different uses that exist there, from singles and semis to some home-based businesses, office businesses, and multi-unit businesses. So it is very much a mixed-use corridor, and the existing zoning and official plan framework captures that now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the fact that as of right that's allowed doesn't make it right. But anyway, My other question, two other questions. We had a lengthy discussion at this council when we approved being able to put 4 units in one lot. And I think we were all impressed by the design that one presenter showed, pardon me, where he showed how we could do a fourplex in 2 stories. Yet planning is recommending 3 stories here, and I don't understand why we couldn't keep this to 2 stories and still get 4 units in there. In fact, if it is 2 stories the way that the planner showed the definition of it, it has a full story down below, so he would still have like 9 units in there. Yes, the question is, why can't we keep it to 2 stories?
Through the mayor to the Councilor Garcia. So as identified, the current official plan designation and zoning does permit a height of 20 meters. So in terms of height, this is already permitted as of right, similar to the front yard setback. So to kind of mitigate, because again, we can appreciate that it is a more narrow lot, we have capped the building height to 13 meters, so it is more compatible, but as of right, they could do 6 stories here.
Okay, well, I don't agree, but anyway, my last question regards also parking. We didn't ask the planner if he has any guesstimate of what the price of these units is gonna be, but we have to assume that it will be significant, and therefore, I don't see how we can assume that we can live with less than 1 parking spot at least per unit. Like the fact that you can walk over to the 4th Avenue area in 15 minutes, are the people that are going to be paying for these condos the kind that are not going to have a car and they're just going to walk over there? I don't believe so. I think that we should have sufficient parking, at least 1 parking space per unit. Anyway, that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Next, I have Councilor Miller, followed by Councilor Stevens, Councilor Ratzlaff. Councilor Miller?
Just like, I guess a question because of the talk around what's already allowed on the site and our, the height cap that we propose. If we say no to this proposal, could they come back with a 6-story proposal, and how much say would we have then?
Through the mayor to the councilor, yes, if they decided to do a different lot configuration, which would not require an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 4 Welland Vale Road, they could construct a 20-meter apartment building as of right at 179 Ontario.
Okay, I think that would be a significant concern. And I guess maybe along that same tack, there was some questions or concerns maybe about the potential of this as a precedent. So could planning staff maybe sort of fill us in or infill us on what happens when something like this is approved? How does that impact future development on the street or in the area or similar lots?
Through the mayor to the councillor, should it be council's will to approve this tonight, it does not set a precedent in such that the adjacent properties would get similar permissions just because this application was successful. Planners always look at their recommendations and evaluate proposals in terms with context and look and do an analysis of the policy environment that it exists. And it's not always clean. Sometimes there are conflicting policies that we have to evaluate and put in our proposal to council on whether or not we feel that it has been met, where it has or hasn't been met, and still come forth with a recommendation. So it's not that there's a precedent setting here. We do look at every single application based on its own merit and put forth a recommendation based on context and policy evaluation.
Okay, thank you for that. And I can appreciate that even though maybe it isn't a legal precedent, that there could be a feeling that, the type of neighborhood's changing, and maybe that would be factored into future council decisions. But I think it's important to know it's not like a legal setting precedent. And to that point, I'll just note that there are several taller buildings, homes, and the apartment building across the street as well, just in terms of the height and the neighborhood design for this. So I think those are my only questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might have missed asking this question to Dan. Maybe staff could help me. On the page 21 of the 32 from Better Neighborhoods, he had mentioned that they were putting in new sewer lines for got my glasses on, 191, is it? 181 and 183 Ontario Street. So, because there's a right-of-way, so those sewer lines, is that a cost of the developer is paying to do that? Can I just get a nod or something, or do they know, or staff knows? I don't know.
Through the mayor to the councillor, anytime that there is servicing works required to implement a proposed development, it is at the financial responsibility of the developer.
Yeah, but this here, they're doing it in order to really to help 183 and 181, right? There's no requirement. They don't have to do this. They're just being nice.
Through the mayor to the councillor, when the functional servicing work is explored in further detail through the site plan agreement, and we've already heard tonight from the applicant's designer that there is going to be some regrading proposed in this area, that new sanitary sewer will have to be built through the site to, first of all, to correct the existing condition that seems to be antiquated, as well as to capture any adjacent on-site flows now to accommodate the development. So the design is still going to be under review at time of site plan, but it seems from what the developer has said today that the site is going to require some storm work.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Ratzlaff, followed by Councillor Dodge, and then Councillor Williamson and Councillor Townsend.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, through you. I share the concern I think that residents raised, and I think was raised with the petition that that intersection there, and Councillor McPherson referred to this as well, the intersection at Welland and Welland Vale is difficult to navigate, especially the left turn. So I'm happy to hear that the region is taking a look at that intersection. The reason for the difficulty, though, I think is associated with a number of different things, least of all, the number of residents that live along Welland Vale. And, how that street, that stretch of Welland, I think it will continue to be a challenge and something that we need to keep our eyes on. And how you address traffic on that street is something we've talked a lot about actually around council. And I think it's part of the reason why we provided staff with the vision that that they have, or that we have as a city for Ontario Street. And it was mentioned by staff that that vision is looking to has identified Ontario Street and that section of Ontario Street as an intensification corridor. The reason for that, of course, presenters pointed it out, but one of the reasons for that is because it's well connected to transit, it's well connected to services, and that is it's been partly identified as an intensification corridor because it will help address our transit traffic problems, right? So when more people move into those areas, hopefully they're not owning 3 or 4 vehicles. We're hoping that they actually take advantage of transit, they take advantage of the fact that they're close to amenities. And doing things like lowering parking requirements is another attempt to address the traffic concerns, because it means that we're trying to attract people to an area that can service them, people who don't have as many cars as a typical suburban sprawl would require. So we've provided staff with that vision. This is a vision that we have for our city. That's why the zoning on Ontario, that part of Ontario Street reflects that. So although I totally agree that that intersection is difficult to navigate, I don't think that adding 12 more units is going to significantly make the problem worse. I think there's other reasons for it. And then finally, I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Miller's point that sending this back to the drawing board doesn't mean that we're going to get a 2-story building. As of right, it could be a lot higher and it could be a lot closer to the road. And what we have here is something that is 12 units that doesn't actually require driveway access to Ontario Street, which would also be a very difficult intersection or difficult access to navigate. Probably more difficult than Welland Vale. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ratzlaff. Councillor Dodge.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff. My questions are, I mean, there's been lots of questions already asked that I was thinking as well, but it's around a couple of the questions that the residents had asked. And I think that when we're building and putting these infill lots into existing neighborhoods, we forget to make them compatible with what's around them. And the one gentleman, he was there, he was quite concerned, obviously, with the trees, that they're going to be lost and stuff like that. But he did say a couple of things that were very real problems that we've had to deal with in our ward with infilling and whatnot. And it doesn't come to light until after the project's finished and the developer, you know, he's moved on and, you know, the residents are left with what's happening. One of the things that he mentioned was his chimney and the fact that he enjoys using his fireplace, and that, you know, there could be a concern with it blowing into windows or balcony doors and whatnot in the new building. And then the other question I had was around the fact that the entrance to the apartment is kind of like adjacent to his yard. And when I'm looking at it, I'm wondering if, like, when it's being, you know, reconfigured, like, well, not reconfigured, but when they're building it, if there's a way that they can change that entranceway so that it wouldn't be so obtrusive to his backyard and the, you know, the use that he has of that. And then the third thing that happens a lot is grading and flooding and things that happen to the neighboring properties, that once everything's said and done and it's gone, when the flooding starts happening into the neighbors, then there's no recourse really for them other than through, you know, a civil matter or whatever to get those things rectified. So, you know, those are three things that I'm wondering if we can, and then the fourth one was when maybe through the site plan or something, I'm not sure. But the concern that the neighbors have also of, you know, the loss of the light coming into their home, if there's a way that we could, you know, do that so that, you know, instead of 45, it could be much less than that, or have it somehow that it wouldn't be affected by that. So sorry for a lot of questions, but I'm just wondering if you can answer any of that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'll tackle the grading question, and then I'll defer to my colleagues. So through the site plan application process, the applicants prepare with a qualified civil engineering professional what's called a grading and drainage plan. This plan will show that the development site can contain its own stormwater management on the property and how it's going to leave the property without impacting other adjacent properties. That forms part of the approval, which is registered on title, and the city then takes securities to make sure that that is built. After the property is constructed, staff undertake another inspection of the property to make sure it was built according to plan before giving back any securities back to the applicant. After that process has concluded, maybe years down the road, yes, things settle or residents build gardens and swales or put garden sheds and swales, and then there are certain flooding impacts. That's when it becomes a civil matter. But the city does have a process in place to deal with the overall design and stormwater management of new developments through the site plan process.
And sorry, how long does that, like, how long is that in effect?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the site plan agreement is in effect in perpetuity since it's registered on title. We hold securities until such time that the property has been developed and inspected, and it's usually for a year at least after occupancy.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yeah, through the mayor, I'll try to answer a couple of the other councilors' other questions. Firstly, with respect to chimneys, I don't think this would be any different than having a two-story house next to a bungalow. The building is still set back probably 4+ meters from the neighboring dwelling. They're not quite exactly side by side. It's not, I'll be frank, it's not a conflict we have experienced on other infill sites where we had infill or any new construction next to a house with a chimney. Of course, chimneys are typically used when the time of year when people have their windows closed, so it's not a regular conflict that we experience. So I don't expect it to be any different on this site. Tammy talked about the stormwater management issue. I think the side issue, the entrance of the question of the location of the building entrance, right now it has been proposed at the center of the south side yard. So it's sort of equidistant between the Ontario Street sidewalk and the rear parking lot. I believe the resident that expressed concerns with that location resides to the north, not to the south of that property. So flipping it to the other side would not be helpful for those concerns. The alternative would be to try to move the entrance to either the front or the back of the building, but that would have the effect of requiring the building to be larger so that you could get interior corridors to connect all the way from that entrance to the front units, and it would result in the building having to become larger and reduce side yard setbacks to accommodate the interior corridors that would now be needed. So if the objective is to minimize the footprint and provide larger setbacks for this building, that would have the opposite effect. And I think I already spoke about the sunlight access. We're pretty confident that this building will still allow significant solar access for the rear yard on the property to the north. Because of its location, we don't anticipate any shadow impacts on the other properties.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the answers. So I just have one comment. I know that in Grantham, we have 2 properties that I can definitely tell you that we've had problems with chimneys bothering neighbors, many complaints, and it's been very difficult for the people that have purchased the infill and the existing property owners. So it is a very real thing that happens. And it's unfortunate that it does happen, and you can't always see the things that are going to happen and how they affect the surrounding neighborhoods or neighbors until the property is actually being, used and lived in. So I'm hoping that at some point, maybe there's a way that they could come together and perhaps make the entrance so that it's works well with all the neighbors. And those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the land use planning staff. I guess my first concern is the fact that the residents at 181 Ontario Street attempted to get some representation from the land use planning community and were unable to, so it kind of leaves them at a disadvantage and imbalance that they had to do their own research and come up with their own presentations, and as good a job as they did, they're not professional planners or have those credentials. Is this a problem in our planning regime now that people can't get a representation when they're coming to council?
Through the mayor to the councillor, through the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, planners who are certified are expected to be independent and professional in their opinions. And as long as they're not conflicted out, would be able to review any type of development proposal and discuss with the client whether or not they can or cannot support a certain outcome. So without knowing and not wanting to know the individuals that the constituent contacted with regards to this, it could have been for a variety of reasons. Predominantly, they may have agreed with the proposal and that it met good infill guidelines and they felt they could support it, and then in that so they were not able to represent the resident. Maybe he did mention that he went as far as Toronto. Maybe they weren't willing to take a project on out here. So it really could be for a variety of reasons, but typically for an independent professional planner to decline work, it's because the project or the client themselves, they were unable to support the client themselves in their vision.
Do you think it might be helpful for us to provide perhaps a list of land use planners that local residents could avail themselves to? I mean, you go to a court of law, you're allowed to have a qualified defense lawyer. So would that be a step that we could look at taking?
So through the mayor to the councillor, staff are not in a position to be able to recommend individual planners. There's a multitude of reasons why that would be inappropriate. However, when residents do approach us and say, who should I call, who should I contact, what we do share with them is the consultant directory on the Ontario Planners Institute website so that they can contact, they know they at least have a listing of individuals that they can contact based on geography or type of expertise or something to that impact so that they can do their own research into who they want to hire, but staff aren't in the position of providing individual names.
Thank you. In terms of the shadowing study that the first presenter brought up, I just wonder if you could address that. It does seem like a pretty reasonable, and she got it from just doing some basic research on urban design standards. And why are we not applying that?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor. The objective of having a, let's say, call it a 45-degree angular plane between windows of existing houses and any new development is not accommodated within our zones that have been flagged for intensification. So in our mixed-use zones, in our downtown zones, in our commercial areas, we have side yard or rear yard setback requirements that are intended to accommodate more densely packed built forms, more efficient development patterns. I would imagine that our setback requirements in our lower density residential neighborhoods probably do accommodate that in most situations. There are, of course, always going to be exceptions if you have a very low ranch bungalow next to a two-story, but that's uncommon. But in our areas that we have zoned for mixed-use intensification, larger buildings, more apartments, more density, those two objectives are not necessarily compatible.
Thank you. And then it was sort of the extreme scenario was thrown out there that we can't go back to the drawing board in case we're going to get a zillion-story condo. I think it was said for number 4 Welland Vale, but that's just a residential zone, isn't it? If we took out the common element, what would they be allowed to do on the 179 property in terms of as of right height?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the M1 zoning that's already on the property allows 20 meters, which is typically a 6-story building, 6.5 with a flat roof.
Okay, and if the common element was they weren't allowed to do the parking on that separate parcel, how would that change the nature of what would end up being proposed here, do you figure?
Apologies to the councillor.
Yeah,
I might not be following.
I know it's not an easy question.
I think that if they had, another option is they could merge the properties. If they were to merge the properties, a lot of the decisions that are being made tonight are a result of a desire to have the buildings on separate parcels than the parking lot. If the parcels were merged and they kept the existing zoning, we'd have an issue where we had a parking lot with split zoning. Half of the parking lot would be zoned R1. And half of the parking lot would be zoned M1. So you'd have split zoning on the parking lot, but the location where the apartment building is proposed would not need any amendments. We'd probably have some policy wrinkles to iron out in terms of that apartment building and the fourplex sharing a parking lot and the zoning. required parking for the apartment building being located in a zone where an apartment building is not permitted. That's an issue we would have to resolve. But the uses themselves would otherwise be permitted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williamson. Councilor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. Council will be happy to know I don't actually have any questions. I'm just going to make comments. A lot of my questions have been asked. I'll just say I'm going to be supporting this as is, and the reason being is because I'm concerned that if we vote this down and it goes back, the applicant comes back with a 6-story development on this site. And the neighbors would not be very happy with a 6-story. I'm not willing to take that risk. It looks as though the applicant is trying to be fair with the 3-story development. But again, I'm not going to risk because they are able to build a 6-story building, and 6 stories, 3 stories is quite a significant difference. So for that reason, I'll be voting with the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Only one person hasn't spoken yet. Nope. All right then. With that then, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
No.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Councillor Dodge.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, we move on to item number 9, which is discussion reports, and 9.1, Economic Development and Tourism Services Municipal Development Corporation implementation. Before discussing the report, Brian York, Director of Economic Development and Government Relations, will provide brief introductory comments. Mr. York.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the report before you this evening seeks to satisfy Council's direction to further the work of incorporating an MDC and satisfying the legislative requirements to move forward, including a business case study, public consultation, and preparation of an asset transfer policy. The mandate of the proposed MDC will be focused on 3 areas: unlocking municipal properties for housing development, supporting strategic long-term planning, and delivering public value. The incorporation of the MDC not only achieves one of the initiatives identified in the city's Housing Accelerator Fund application, but also is a priority initiative included in the city's strategic plan. And it is through strategic leadership and innovative partnerships, the MDC is set to play a pivotal role in shaping the community's future, driving positive change, and delivering lasting public value. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. York. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation? We'll go with Councillor Miller and Councillor Harris. So at this time, we'll ask questions and discuss the first 5 clauses. There was a request that we move the first 5 clauses together. Those are the approval of the MDC. The 6th clause will be dealt with separately and after questions and answers for the first 5 clauses. Assuming that the first 5 clauses pass, the 6th clause would be to identify the 2 members who would be sitting on the board. So at this time, I'll take questions with respect to those first 5 clauses, and I have Councillor Kushner. Questions and comments, I should say. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first question I have is what the make up the directors, and I notice there are no directors from the community at large. Is that correct?
For the initial phase, that's correct. The board, as it's constituted from the members that would be elected tonight and included in this report, would then make decisions to bring back to augment the board with community members.
Okay, my second question is with respect to the cost of the consultant. What exactly is the consultant expected to do?
Through the mayor to the councilor, can you clarify what consultant?
Okay, I did see the word consultant, which was a red flag for me. Okay, I thought at the beginning there's a statement with respect to a consultant.
There is the consultant or the consultant's report.
Right.
So and I'm going to look to Mr. York. So with respect to the business case,
Right.
the consultant was brought on board to build the business case for this. So I think that's what Councillor Kushner's referring to. So
Yes.
what their role was and whether it continues.
Yeah, perhaps I could expand. Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, Urban Metrics was hired to help develop the business case as well as the feasibility report. Council chooses to incorporate the MDC. The inaugural board would look to hire on consultants to look at remediation efforts of a property once we've identified property for disposition, as well as staff up the corporation.
And once again, to refresh my memory, how many properties do we have that we're looking at for selling or for rental?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, the initial feasibility report identified about a dozen properties that could be used for the provision of housing. Staff and certainly the inaugural board would come back to council with a recommendation on what could be surplused and for what benefit.
So it could be less than 12 properties.
Through the mayor to the councillor, absolutely. Looking at comparators, Oakville has done a couple of deals to date. I believe there's 4 or 5 properties listed on their website with 2 or 3 sold.
Okay, and you cite the advantage, or the consultant cites the advantage that with the corporation we could unlock city properties for development. Why can we not do that now?
Through the mayor to the councillor, as previously reported, we're under-resourced in these capabilities. So the intention here is to take some of the effort off of city staff, council, and put it on to experts to be more nimble in getting a deal done.
Well, if we have properties that we want to unlock, why can we not hire local real estate agents who belong to provincial and national corporations?
Through the mayor to the councillor, so it's not just about the process of selling the properties, it's about the idea of looking at it through a more strategic lens. So having a corporation that's set up to be able to make partnerships where there may be a nonprofit involved, a developer, the city, the region, and multiple properties as well. It's just not something that can be managed at this point, and from a bureaucratic structure, it doesn't allow the flexibility as a city department.
When we were on the task force to look at the future of Glenridge School, we did contact the nonprofit organizations, and none of them were interested in renting space or purchasing the building. So why with a corporation would they be more interested?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I mean, I think it's a site-specific situation. It's also a bit of a different housing market currently for the needs that we are trying to address. But it does also, like I said, allow those partnerships and ability to deal with multiple properties. So maybe it's an idea of where they have assets that they need to sell to fund this new venture. You can kind of play in that realm a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think as council knows, I've had concerns about this corporation from day one, and I still have some concerns, but I have a few questions about the report today. So Councilor Kushner asked about the number of properties, which I wanted to ask about, but I guess on page 4 of the mandate, we say that we could strategically acquire property through this corporation. So question, where would the funding come from for that? Is that all through the HAF?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes.
Okay. And if I read the report correctly, we talk about potentially $2 to $5 million being invested in this over 5 years or so?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes.
Okay. So that's a lot of money. Could we not potentially build a lot more housing, which is our priority, if we use that $2 to $5 million for building more housing as opposed to supporting a corporation?
Through the mayor to the council, the intention here is to leverage the property to build more housing. We may be a partner, we may be a partner with an agency, could be developer, principal ourselves. Really, it's property dependent on what we're going to spend, and that upper limit of 2 to 5 over the course of the HAF funding is what we are requesting the support of council for.
And I'm just going to jump in just because we were talking about the money there. It's important to note Niagara Regional Housing has a general figure of how much it costs per door to build a unit. Right now, that number is somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 per unit. So if we were to spend that $2 to $5 million directly on housing, that's what we would be spending. So $2 to $5 million might only get you 10 to 15 units. So everybody understands sort of the apples to apples comparison, what is currently happening in the local Niagara market with regional housing.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor, but that would be on top of whatever else is invested in that housing, right? So those would be additional units.
No, those would be what, like $5 million at $400,000 a door would get us 12 and a half units. So the 5 million would buy us 12 and a half units total.
Right, but if I understand correctly, the corporation would still, if it was there, it would be working with, let's say, a developer to build 30 units, as an example. So we're just saying this 2 to 5 million could make it 45 as opposed to 30.
Well, I think with the MDC, the 2 to 5 million would fund multiple projects. And I mean, I would hope the return would be significantly higher than just an additional 12 and a half units. I just wanted to put that context out there for what that could directly buy. The purpose of the Housing Accelerator Fund money, the federal government's been very clear. It's not to use the money to build units directly. It's to make policy changes and to implement programs that will facilitate significantly bigger builds than what the money could buy directly by partnering with the private and the nonprofit sector. Mr. York?
Yeah, through the chair to Councilor Garcia, that total quantum value will be utilized for land remediation studies. Maybe some transportation studies for the area that's going to be redeveloped to encourage a developer to pick up a market-ready site.
Thank you for that. A couple of more questions, if I may, Mr. Mayor. On page 8, I forget if that's still under the mandate, but the report mentions that we would avoid perceived or actual conflicts that council would have. Can you please elaborate? How would we have a or a conflict in terms of approving development of a property?
Through the mayor to the councillor, the idea is that if council is directing, okay, this is the property that we want to sell at a purchase price, then you're also the one that is approving upzoning on that property or a development application on the property. You're essentially approving increasing the value of the property that you're selling. When it's being dealt with through arm's length corporation, it acts as if they are a private developer that is coming to council for that decision. So it creates a bit of separation there.
Okay. Last question on page 9. We say that the corporation may borrow money. Who covers the interest on this? Is it all out of the HAF? And what happens if the obligation on that borrowing, the terms are beyond the 5 years that we're looking at?
Through the mayor, I would defer to legal on that. As I understand, it's part of the Municipal Act in establishing a corporation, so it's one of the benefits that the corp could exercise if required. Staff have no intention of borrowing any money as part of this corporation at this time, but if we did, we'd come back to the sole shareholder with a report, sole shareholder being council, to explain and rationalize the purpose.
But the term of the grant that we have is 5 years, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So are you asking city solicitor to comment, or?
Certainly, if the solicitor has something to add.
Sorry, could I get the question again?
Okay, my question was, let's say that this corporation was approved and we have a grant from the federal government that is valid for 5 years. But now we're saying that this corporation may borrow money. So if they borrow money, and the grant is a 5-year grant, could we be exposed to paying a loan after the 5 years, which is no longer coming out of that grant?
Well, it's possible. I think the law essentially provides that an opportunity to borrow money. It's a possibility. I don't see any intention here to borrow money, and it seems to be largely hypothetical. But if money were borrowed hypothetically, the loan would have to be repaid.
Okay, thank you. But even if we have no intention, we're approving, giving them that authority is what we're saying, right?
So I'm going to jump in here. So we would be giving them the ability to bring that back to us, to ask us if they could. So we're not actually giving authority to the corporation to borrow without getting approval from City Council.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an important piece there. Hypothetically, there is no intention. The MDC, the intention of it is to be self-funding, so doing things that allow it to not need to come back, borrow money, or come back to council and ask for more money. But hypothetically, if we wanted, if there was a desire of the corporation to come, they would still have to ask permission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last question, if I may, through you to the CAO. When we had a discussion about this before, when the grant was approved, he did mention in the report that there was some flexibility as to how we spent these funds, but I know you sent us an email telling us that Oakville their grant had been reduced because it didn't follow through on the specific commitments, I guess.
For clarity, their grant was rescinded. It was a $25 million grant, very similar to ours, and they had to give it all back.
The total grant?
The whole thing. They had only been paid out 5%, $1.28 million, whereas we got a 25% tranche right up front. For whatever reason, Oakville only got 5% initially, so that was all they had received. Had they received a 25% tranche, they would have had to give the entire $6.4 million back, but the entirety of the 4-year grant was rescinded.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Councilor Ratzlaff.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you, I just one comment about the Municipal Development Corp, or a few comments. I think there are a number of sites throughout our city that would clearly benefit from a municipal development corporation. But we see, I think, 320 in Geneva is an interesting case study where the city was able to use its land and partner with the region, and we're hoping that we see affordable housing built on that site. Before it was the region, though, it was Bethlehem Housing. It was a long process, and I can't help but think that if we had had a municipal development corporation before we got started in that process, we'd actually have housing there today, right now. That's what a municipal development corporation allows us to do. It allows us to turn underutilized land into housing, or at least, the very least, to use it better. And you don't have to look very far in our city to find this underutilized land, right? Port Dalhousie, you have the Dalhousie House, we have the courthouse, we have the commercial space under the parking garage. We have the Garden City Arena site. We need to find a site for a pool and we need to think more strategically about all those sites, right? A municipal development corporation helps us do that. Not all those sites will turn into housing. Some of them are better suited for other things. But I think it's very hard to deny that they're all underutilized. They could all be used better, right? And it's not just about city properties either. It's also about properties that we missed out on. The Y being one of those properties. If we had had a municipal development corporation, I can't help but think that we'd own the Y right now and we'd have another pool. The old hospital site in Queenston Street, I can't help but think that something different would have happened on that site if we'd had a municipal development corporation. But that went from the public sphere to the private sphere, and it's been sitting empty for a long time. What's another site? GM, yeah. The old Meriton School, high school, right? That again, public land that went private, and it's just sitting there. Hospital on Queenston Street, yeah. You know, you don't have to look far. You don't have to look far. It doesn't matter what wards you're in. You don't have to look far to find a site that would benefit from a municipal development corporation, would benefit from the city thinking more strategically about its real estate needs today, and its real estate needs in 20 years' time. Yeah. So I'm excited to to support this. I'm excited to get to work on thinking more strategically about our real estate in the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ratzlaff, and thank you for stealing all of the good examples that many of us who are going to throw out there, using them all in one speech so that nobody has anywhere else to go. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to staff and the consultants for the report. It's been about 4 years in the making getting here, and accelerated a bit by the HAF. But I do think, even though it has been a long time, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. We still haven't determined what exactly this Municipal Development Corporation is going to look like, or what its specific goals are. I think Councillor Ratzlaff has illuminated that it's important to be strategic. And maybe it's better not to think about all the missed opportunities over the last 25 years or so, not having a more robust real estate arm or municipal development corporation. My research on this, and I think the report talks to this a bit, is there's a lot of different ways to set this up. There's a lot of different goals. Calgary has had a very successful one where they've tripled their property assessment in targeted neighborhoods. Obviously, that has significant value for the city itself. We got an email today about Cincinnati and some of the work that's being done to revitalize certain neighborhoods. I think a comparable one at FCM this weekend, I talked to someone from Saskatoon. They have the Saskatoon Land Corporation. They've had it since 1953, so it's not a new idea. I know that freaks people out sometimes. This is an old idea. It generated $22 million in net earnings for the city of Saskatoon last year. It was involved in almost 200 plots of land. So I think when we talk about 6, it's going to be we're going to be doing a lot more than that. Its main goal is to generate revenue, but it's also rehabilitating land that otherwise is unattractive for development residentially, and then it's selling it for a profit and using that money to do things like rapid transit, or more specifically, not rely on the property tax levy as much. I think we all know the problems we have with that. So, that's 22. Saskatoon's a little bit bigger. Don't get me wrong, they've been up and running for 71 years. But when we're talking in the tens of millions of dollars of revenue, these are just opportunities we can't miss. So excited to see this move forward. And again, I think this is going to be a transformational change for the better for our city. We have long wrung our hands about our inability to get more involved in the housing crisis, and this is exactly how we do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'll keep my comments short. Thank you, staff, for all the hard work that's been put into this. Clearly, the Municipal Development Corporation is going to be a key and important piece of getting more homes built and partnerships within the community. And it was certainly a key part of the Housing Accelerator Fund that we received money for. And so just to keep it short, I'm in full support, and I look forward to what's to come with the MDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like my colleagues, I'm excited to see this come to fruition. While in Calgary, I did get a chance to tour one of the Calgary's Municipal Land Corporation areas that was under redevelopment, and it was, they created the Land Corporation in 2000, and to date, the city of Calgary, along with provincial dollars and federal dollars, they invested, and their focus was on infrastructure. So they put in $396 million in infrastructure, which I know is a very large number, but to date, they've had a $3 billion return on their investment. And that is a section of town that was completely underutilized. It now has the full gambit of housing options for people, literally from a Salvation Army shelter all the way up to incredibly beautiful condos and everything in between. I think that, as Councillor Miller pointed out, I think creating that vision for what the Municipal Development Corporation wants to achieve is going to be essential, because Calgary, in this case, had a very clear vision. They had a 20-year master plan. and they are achieving it. And it's, as other people have mentioned, it's going to be more than, 6, 12 properties eventually when it gets going, and I think it will really be a transformational change. And I want to thank Councillor Porter for originally getting this idea and this concept going, and I want to thank staff for all their time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lindell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of comments myself. I'm excited about this corporation mostly because it's going to give us the opportunity to work with nonprofits to actively support and build some affordable housing, which is something that I think helps us build smarter, not just to build, but to build smarter. And I think that's something that the MDC is going to give us. I also am excited for this opportunity, and I want to thank staff and Director York for all of their hard work, and good luck to any of the councillors who end up on the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Initially, I was concerned about this corporation, but the fact that we received a lot of money from the federal government, now it's not going to cost us any money for 5 years, and I see it as a trial. And if this corporation works out in 5 years, and it makes the money that my colleagues say it's going to make us, then obviously we'll keep it. If it doesn't produce, then no money lost, and we will go on with the way we've gone on before. So I think, in my mind, it's worthwhile giving it a shot, and hopefully we get the right people on it, and it produces what we hope to produce. But the key is it's not going to cost our taxpayers in St. Catharines any money, and if we happen to give it up like Oakville does, then you share it with everybody else, I guess, in the country. So I'd rather keep it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're well aware, I'm not in favor of the corporation. To me, it sets up another bureaucracy, and we don't need more staff, more bureaucracy. What we need is programs like the Community Improvement Program that we had years ago. That program invested in infrastructure. The neighborhoods were involved, and as a result of that, you've seen dramatic and good growth in West St. Catharines and in Port Dalhousie, and I think some in Meriton. So there are other ways of doing it. We don't have to set up a very expensive corporation. It sounds good, we're a corporation, and that has an appeal to it. The wording has an appeal to it, but I'm not convinced that they can do things better than what we are doing here. We've got 11 or 12 properties. I don't believe we should be getting into more properties. Though one of the situations that we had early is that the city bought the Burstein property, and we bought high and we sold at a low price. And that was a great idea at the time, but to me, that resembles a corporation. And I can't see the corporation doing any better than what we've done. And I recognize that denial could put our grant from the federal government in jeopardy, and you've mentioned the city of Oakville, but the reason their grant was taken away is they weren't zoning for high density. They were not zoning for high density, and therefore their grant was taken away. And I don't see a parallel here. I would think that if we're a bit more innovative and ask the federal government to put this money instead into housing, that would better serve our community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Are there any other comments? Just looking around the horseshoe. All right, seeing none, I will close things off. I do appreciate Councillor Kushner's comments with respect to the Community Improvement Program. As I always like to point out, the Community Improvement Program right now costs about $26 per median home in the community per year. And because of the CIP, it generates $49. So it is a net benefit to every household in the community. Their taxes are lower because of the CIP. That's one of my favorite stats out there. just because it was raised. I appreciate Councillor Lindell raising the piece about nonprofits, and Councillor Ratzlaff actually referenced that when he was talking about 320 Geneva, and this is a conversation I have regularly. There have been missed opportunities because we don't have an MDC. That is not any disrespect towards our staff, but the reality is we haven't resourced real estate and developing our real estate to the point where we could make good use of it in the past. I think that the people who were involved in the original proposal for 320 Geneva, the Rotary Club, Pantera, city staff, everybody was trying to work towards a goal, but again, not resourced properly. Had we had an MDC at the time, it might have had a different outcome. I think we still got a very beneficial outcome at 320 Geneva by partnering with the region and Niagara Regional Housing. But I think the MDC provides new opportunities going forward. And I will finish with this, and I appreciated the Deputy Mayor's comments. I understand the concern that councillors raise with respect to the costs of the MDC. The benefit for us is we received a grant explicitly with this as one of the things we were going to fund. The federal government has taken on the risk in this situation. And the federal government has said, we're going to give you this money, and this is what you said you were going to do with it. And so I believe we have to move forward with this, but I think it offers us a chance to do something different. And the reality is, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping you get a different result each time. This is our chance to do something different, to try something we haven't tried in the community with an arm's length corporation that's going to be able to make decisions in the best interest of whatever mandate we give it. And that's the benefit for the first group of people who sit on that board, is they're going to be able to help set the mandate, which, as always, will come back to this council to make sure council is comfortable with it. But then to be able to fulfill that mandate and get housing built in the community, I think is a real opportunity for us. So I hope for unanimous support. I recognize and appreciate those who don't feel the same way I do, but I do hope we can support this program and move forward and take this chance and be ambitious. Something that we all heard when we listened to the Prime Minister speak, those of us who were in Calgary, he talked a lot when it came to housing about needing to have ambition. We demonstrated ambition, that's why we were chosen. Now this is our opportunity to follow through with that ambition, and I think we can make this something the community can be very proud of over the next couple of years. With that, I'll turn it over to the clerk and ask her to call the roll.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
And Mayor Sisko.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, so the second portion is to add 2 councillors to the executive board. We have had, let me just take a look here. Last week, members of council were contacted to put their names forward. 4 councillors have put their name forward, Councillors Stevens, Ratzlaff, Miller, and Harris for 2 positions. We will go to a ballot system for those councillors in person. For those in person, you're going to select only the councillors you wish to appoint. For the councillors on Zoom, you can email the clerk, Ms. Sullivan, or the council coordinator, Ms. Vrabchenyak. Vrabsenjak. I'm not even close. I wasn't even trying. Oh, you even spelled it phonetically for me. What is wrong with me? You can email Ms. Sullivan or Ms. Vrabsenjak now with who you would like to appoint. So it's Councillors Stevens, Ratzlaff, Miller, and Harris. Pick the 2 that you would like, up to 2, and we will tally the results. So do we have ballots? Ms. Vrabsenjak is going to hand them out. And we will take a pause while we do this and count the ballots. Councillors, you can pick up to 2. I believe the ballot says up to 1. 2 to be appointed. You can vote for 2. Okay, councilors, can I beg indulgence? Perhaps we could move on to 9.2, which is the bylaw to regulate the delivery of handbills in the city of St. Catharines. Are we okay to move on and then come back and complete the vote on this? Everybody's comfortable with that? Good. Mover and a seconder for this, I've got Councilors Phillips and Dodge. The council approved the bylaw to regulate the delivery of handbills in the city of St. Catharines attached as Appendix 1. Does Councilor Harris, do you have somewhere to be? Oh, okay. So, are there any speakers to the motion? We've debated this quite a bit, so I don't know if we necessarily need to speak to it. All right, well, seeing no questions or comments with respect to this bylaw, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, I will continue on to motions and we will move through. 10.1 has been deferred. 10.2 is the issuance of debentures. Moving it, I have Councillor Garcia. I'm going to suggest perhaps Councillor Dodge as the Vice Chair of the Budget Committee to second the motion. Councillor Dodge, are you fine with that? Yep. She is. Wonderful. So the motion is on the screen. Councillor Garcia, do you want to speak to this?
Only to say, Mr. Mayor, that it's a housekeeping item based on the capital budget that we approved for this year. So it's a procedure that we follow every year in terms of what we have agreed we have to fund through debt. So I think the motion is on the screen and it speaks for itself that it's 9.8 million.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia, and I appreciate that, and it's an important comment to make. This is a procedural motion. This was previously approved. This is not new money, just in case anybody in the community gets concerned. Not a decision tonight. This is just following through on commitments we have already made. So with that, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right. We will return back to item 9.1 and the conclusion of that vote with the final clause. Madam Clerk.
Is to appoint Councillor Miller and Councillor Harris.
Okay. So the following executive positions or designates in each case be authorized to serve as the initial board of directors of the Municipal Services Corporation: the mayor, the chief administrative officer, the director of financial management services, the director of economic development, and the following two St. Catharines city councilors, Councilors Harris and Councilor Miller. And I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Stevens.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Lindell.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Ratzlaff.
Yes.
And Mayor Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Moving on to item 12, the report request. Councilor McPherson, you have a report request. If you just want to give us a brief explanation of what the request is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just asking for a staff report on a review of the encampment program to include current arrangements with existing and potential community partners like NASO, Niagara Region Community Outreach Services, Reach Niagara, and others, looking at options to provide housing solutions, shelter solutions, and encampment care and cleanup, and expanding on primary care and counseling services in this. That's fine. And that the report come back by the end of Q3 prior to our budget deliberations. Just to look at our current services because they're quite expensive. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor McPherson. Moved by Councilor McPherson, seconded by Councilor Miller. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Minutes, we've got minutes to receive. Mover and seconder, Councilor Lindell, Councilor Harris. Receive and file the minutes of the advisory committees. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Closed session, there is no closed session. Motion arising from closed, there are no motions arising from closed. That the bylaws listed on the council agenda as 8 a.m. be read a first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and the clerk. Mover and a seconder. Councilor Townsend, Councilor Kushner, all those in favor? Opposed? Who wants to adjourn us? Councilor Kushner, Councilor Phillips, favor? Opposed? Good night now.